Hello. Today we invite Dr. Gibru Bethel. Who is a friend of mine. He was my colleague, and he's still my colleague. We both worked in different places in the world of business, and we were um, colleagues at the POSCO steel company for a while. Then we both joined the world of academia, both in South Korea. And well, he remained there, and I moved out of South Korea later. So thank you so much, Dr. Gabriel, for being with us here today to enlighten us about the Sino-African relations in his delightful presentation entitled China's Strategic Partnership with Africa, the Case of Ethiopia in a Multipolar World. Dr. Gabriel is a PhD holder from Seoul National University, one of the most prestigious universities in South Korea, in international relations, area studies, and international cooperation as well. Dr. Gebru, he was enrolled in the Global Education Cooperation Program at the mentioned university. He, as I said, later worked for a certain period of time at the POSCO, and he recently, in a very few recently, I think in few days, 2, 3, 1 week maximum, he joined the Posan University of Foreign Studies as a research professor at the Institute of African Studies. Congratulations once more for your new position, and congratulations to us as well to have such an eminent scholar with whom we will work together in different places. I personally worked with Dr. Gebru in some papers, and we are still working on others, and we will work on more in the future. Not to take much of your time, I will give the floor to Dr. Gibru to enlighten us about his presentation. The floor is yours, Dr. Gibru.
Thank you. Thank you, my brother, for introducing me. Really, it is a great pleasure for me to speak today in this medium. So I will just go right away into the presentation since we have a very limited time. So today my speech will be about what was described earlier, China's strategic partnership with Africa. In fact, I am writing a journal article about this, and in fact, it will be, of course, this is the case of Ethiopia, but we can also work about the relationship that China has with other major African countries, and then, we can proceed, in working on how other also major world powers will have, an interest in many African countries. So it is very famous. It is, of course, very known that China is becoming, a very important development partner, and also making important relationship with many African countries. And Ethiopia is also becoming, these days, a very central focal point, for the Chinese relationship with African countries. By receiving a lot of investment in infrastructure and then manufacturing and also technology. So today in my work, what I would like to do is to apply this, what we call this agency theory. Later on, I will explain this to explain how less powerful states, such as Ethiopia, can exercise their influence and shape outcomes even when dealing with stronger countries or stronger partners like China or the US or European countries. So we will see that Ethiopia is no more a passive recipient of aid, but a strategic actor pursuing its national development goal through careful negotiation and diplomatic balancing. To just give some highlight about the historical context bit of the relationship between China and Ethiopia. Of course, it also works when about the historical relationship that China has, with other African countries. China and Ethiopia have relationship dating back since the 1950s. But as we know that the Chinese historical background tells us that, during the 1960s, 70s, China was really working hard on its domestic uh, problems. But later, when it comes to the 1990s, China started to consider Africa as a very important, partner continent. Then after during the Cold War, of course, China supported Ethiopian government at that time, the communist military government, diplomatically and militarily, especially when we had a war with Somalia during the Ogaden War, we call it. And as Ethiopia transitioned to a market-oriented system, China increased its market relationship by investing in Ethiopia through what we call this the go out policy or the go global policy. Later, through the Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI, that is very important now. In China saw Ethiopia as a very stable and strategically located partner, especially the Ethiopian location uh, right there, the geopolitical relationship, location between Asia and African continent, and the situation that we have in Somalia. Ethiopia is a very important partner. Ethiopia also is using China as a source of capital and infrastructure without any political strings. No, there is no interference from the Chinese side. So agency theory tells us, how Ethiopia leveraged this historical moment to align China's interests with its own. And some of the areas of cooperation between China and Ethiopia includes infrastructure, industry, technology, and education. The most prominent one is the recent Addis Ababa Djibouti Railway. So I have a map here that you can see. So Ethiopia is a landlocked country, so it needs, Djibouti or the other neighboring countries, to reach the sea. So Djibouti is, the most important harbor for Ethiopia to import things, from outside. So for the logistics purpose, Ethiopia was in need of, this important railroad, which China has recently built, of course, refurnished, 759 kilometer, so long. And also there are so many power plants, hydroelectric power plants built by the Chinese companies, including the Gibe, the third is the famous one. And there are also four or five industrial zones, built in various regions of Ethiopia, where many Chinese companies have their places. They opened, infrastructure, uh, large scale infrastructure cooperation for between China and Ethiopia. So currently, it is assumed that there are 4,500, more than 4,500 Chinese operated projects, in Ethiopia. Ethiopia has used Chinese financing to support its broader structural transformation goals, including industrialization and digital modernization. So the Ethiopian telecom is now being operated by a Chinese company. Rather than blindly accepting Chinese terms, but Ethiopia has actively shaped project focused and also pressed for job creation and negotiated technology transfer, showing clear evidence of agency. So in all those projects that we see, of course, at the beginning, it seems that Ethiopia was like a passive acceptor of Chinese aid, but we see that later as time goes on, Ethiopia was actively using Chinese finance and then support project by project. Also, it helped, the Ethiopian young people to create to get to create jobs and then to gain jobs. And also, the technology transfer is now really getting broader and broader. Yeah, so these are some of the pictures that I have, about the Chinese, investment in Ethiopia. So this is one of the industrial zone, the Eastern industrial zone. So we have four and then plus one, I think five industrial zones, in Ethiopia. Mostly the Chinese companies are occupying, these places. And this is the railway, the railroad recently made by the Chinese. And of course, we will talk about the China-Africa cooperation, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. This is the latest one, the 2014. The Ethiopian Prime Minister was also present there. So I already mentioned about the telecommunications, Huawei and ZTE. They built, Ethiopia's broadband and mobile networks. And Ethiopia is also actively participating in Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, FOCAC, that we call. And there has been the FOCAC is happening every 3 years, and it has also we already have seen that once it has happened in Africa and then later in Beijing, and it goes on like that. So the 2024, the latest one was in Beijing. So the next one after 3 years will be in Africa. And of course, there are things, there are concerns, about digital sovereignty and then surveillance because the Chinese companies they dominate, the telecommunication field of Ethiopia, and there was some issue about, being uh, uh, China is trying to doing its surveillance, in uh, the African Union, also in Ethiopia, the Ethiopian government. But Ethiopia and China, they don't look at this as a big deal for them. So they say they have denied it all the time. And Ethiopia always sees that China is a very reliable partner and that doesn't demand, any political reform in return. This is uh, in comparison with the way the US is trying to make, Ethiopia deal with its criteria, such as asking Ethiopia to do some kind of reforms, democratic reforms, as they call it. And the recent problem was when Trump was president during his first term, when he has, suspended, aid to Ethiopia, and this AGOA privileges for African countries, to export, their textile products into the U.S. market without tax. But now this thing has been revoked, especially for Ethiopia. And of course, there were some strong words, between the Ethiopia and the U.S. because of the Jared crisis. This Jared is uh, the dam that Ethiopia is building, on the Nile River, where there is, a problem with Egypt. So the U.S. is, of course, always siding with Egypt, and then Ethiopia is trying to defend itself, by saying, justifying, that the dam is not affecting Egypt, so it is their right, to build a dam on the Nile River. But in all these situations, China has nothing to say. China is just investing, funding projects such as like this the African CDC headquarters in Addis Ababa. This is the Center for Disease Control. And Ethiopia's shift towards China reflects that a calculated strategic decision, not simply ideological alignment, but preferences for consistent economic support. So, using the agency theory, we can interpret Ethiopia's behavior as strategic adaptation within a multi-polar environment. So, I want to explain a little bit about Ethiopia's strategic agency. So, Ethiopia has shown signs of agency in its foreign partnership. So, the way it did it was the first, as I said, it rejected the U.S. pressure to privatize key sectors and resisted externally imposed reforms, but rather it redirected Chinese investment into electric mobility and logistics and negotiated debt restructuring whenever necessary. So yeah, of course, there are always, these fears that the Chinese debt is going up a lot, so that some countries might, in fact, be again neo-colonized, by the Chinese and all by the other, Western, Eastern, powers, including Russia or maybe Japan or South Korea even. But Ethiopia is now showing that it is also a very important country by being a member of the BRICS, backed by the Chinese, and then this symbolized a sovereign move to diversify its alliances, so which means that it is no more only just making its alliance with Western countries, but also it is open with other countries in the global South. And for this, I would like to explain what agency theory is in general. So it comes from the economics and then political science. And it actually explains where a principal delegates its authority to an agent to act on its behalf. So in this case, while we are discussing international relations and development studies, agency has been reinterpreted to analyze how states in the global south, those countries such as Ethiopia, asserting their agency. That is how they pursue their own goals when engaging with more powerful actors like China and the US. So the modern application emphasized that African states are not merely passive recipients of aid or investment, but are the strategic actors that manipulate, negotiate, and resist external pressures to pursue their national development goals. So based on this, I'd like to say that similar situations will happen in the future for other African countries. So it implies that this the Africa-China relationship can also be explained, with this agency theory. So African countries can also assert their agency in their relationship with China. So China's development model appeals because of its consistency, pragmatism, and also the respect for the sovereignty, non-interfering interference into the domestic problems. Still, there are challenges with this debt sustainability issue and limited local ownership persist because there are still needs for more technology to transfer into the African countries. But Ethiopia is doing its best, it has attempted, to address this by pushing for better investment terms, expanding the benefits of cooperation to its population. We always say that, whenever China is giving debt and then when the debt is not paid, China will go for the natural resource, in those countries, or of course, taking or maybe I don't know, just going for the infrastructure that it has built, in those countries. But so far in Ethiopia, we haven't seen, this kind of situation. And other countries can also learn that from Ethiopia's selective engagement in strategy. And this broader strategic lesson. So Ethiopia's multipolar diplomacy shows that African states do not need to choose, sides in the U.S. and China rivalry because this is a big issue now in the world. But instead, they can build diversified portfolios of partnerships, and they can assert their development priorities on their own terms. So the theoretical framework that I mentioned, the agency theory, reveals that even in a symmetric relationship, weaker states can also negotiate and resist, and they can reframe the terms of their cooperation with stronger countries. So this Ethiopia's experience may serve a very important blueprint for other African countries who seek to secure their sovereignty or to justify their sovereignty, and also strategic flexibility and also inclusive development. In short, yeah, in conclusion, what I would like to say today is that the Ethiopian Chinese or the Ethiopia-China relationship, or the Sino-China Ethiopia relationship, reflects a broader transformation for Africa's global engagement. And China has offered a very important very significant economic partnership on terms that many African governments find more favorable.
Gebru? Hello? I think there is some issue with the
I think Professor he lost his connection.
uh, Gebru. I think we lost him for the internet. We did not lose him, but we lost the connection with Dr. Gebru. Then thank you so much once
Isn't
again.
difficult.
Yeah, do you hear me, Dr. Gebru? Um, okay, thank you so much, Dr. Gebru, for your delightful presentation uh, about the Sino-African, or mainly the Ethiopian. Um, Dr. Gebru,
Is it fine?
yeah, you're still with us, right?
But yeah, the last sentence was before I spoke. The last sentence, it just disappeared.
Yeah, it disappeared in the conclusion. You still with us?
Shall I do the conclusion part, or
Yes,
I
please.
don't know?
Yes, please. If you don't mind.
Later, maybe you can stick it. You can join it. I don't know.
Yeah, so you can continue. Yeah, we still have time. You can continue about the conclusion.
Okay, but I already said everything. So Uh, yeah. Shall I do the conclusion part alone, or
Yeah, just the conclusion, the last sentences you were about to talk about.
other I was going to say? Okay. So in short, what I was trying to say was that, of course, uh, the world is multipolar. There's the US, the China, and also other powers are still in charge. But we can see that not only Ethiopia, but other African countries can learn from uh, the Ethiopian case by showing that they can use their agency, to secure, to justify their sovereignty, and also, of course, to pursue with their global diplomacy, and also for a better partnership in the multipolar world. I think this was what I was trying to say at the last point.
Hey, thank you so much once again, Dr. Gibro, for your very fruitful presentation. Personally, I learned a lot about the Sino-Ethiopian relations. Well, it is a zoomed in image of the Sino-African relations. If we go back to history, the Sino-African relations go back to the 1950s, and mainly the 1955 at the Bandung Conference, which was the beginning of what's so-called today the global south, or the
Yeah.
spirit of Bandung is still present with the today's global south, or the majority of non-developed northern nations. Yeah, and that time when both China and African countries agreed on set of principles such as the non-interference, the mutual respect between them, the peaceful coexistence given the international context through which they've met, not to be aligned to any of the major camps, the Western or the Eastern one, is USSR or the United States. They also agreed on the non-aggression, the non-interference, as well as the mutual benefit between the two nations. Yeah, if we take the Sino-African relations, it went through different periods of time. The time when China was a newly unified or newly re-established nation, especially at the Mao era, the second era of the open up. However, the post 1990s, when China start becoming a major actor. We do not forget the G77, and the China was the leading member of the G77 between the what's so called today the global south. It's
The global south.
all the name, which is the third world. However, today China and Africa see a broad area of cooperation, given that China is a major bilateral trading partner to Africa. Is a major FTA giver to not FTA, sorry, FDI giver to Africa. Yeah, given that the Africa is one of the largest single markets, especially after the African FTA or CFTA that was established 4 years ago. China has included and actively included Africa in the Belt and Road Initiative, and you spoke a lot about it, Dr. Begibro, especially about Ethiopia and these major infrastructure projects, which you gave us one example of how sub-Saharan Africa is connected to the BRI, but we also can give another example of the whole Africa, which is if we take it from the side of North Africa, Morocco as well. Then both countries or both parties, China is not China is a country like a continent, and Africa is not one single state, but it's more than 50 countries in one continent. They started the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, which started, I think, in about 25 years ago or something. China also has aligned the BRI or the Belt and Road Initiative on the EU Agenda 63. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Gebru, for being with us here today. Thank you to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. See you. Bye.